They found him in the reeds at sunrise. Mud on his lips, bruises like fingerprints stamped into the skin of a child who never learned to lie. His fishing line was still tangled in his fingers, like he died trying to hold on to something gentle. I didn't scream. The scream happened inside, in a place no one could hear, but every spirit would answer. The men who dragged his body back weren't ashamed. They were proud enough to leave boot prints in the soil, as if the ground itself should remember their names. The one who stood in front, the man everyone called Master, looked at me the same way he looked at his cattle. The kind of stare that weighs a soul and finds zero value. He said it like a sermon. Know your place. My son's body was still warm when he taught me that lesson. 7 years I'd watched that boy grow. 7 years of laughter, hunting minnows, whispering secrets at night when the fields were quiet and the moon felt close enough to touch. They took all 7 in one morning. So I made a vow that didn't need words won death for every year they stole from him. 7 men, 7 nights. No mercy. People think revenge is wild like fire. They're wrong. Fire is patient. It waits for the match. I was born with hands meant for work, and a mind meant for remembering the old ways the elders whispered when the moon was a thin blade. Waxen wick. Dirt and salt. Names spoken at the right moment so a coward's heart hears itself. Those men thought power lived in whips and land deeds. But power lives where fear sleeps. And they were terrified of the one thing they could never whip into submission: belief. The parish where we lived was a kingdom carved from swamp and cane. Rich soil raised crops and monsters in equal measure. 7 plantations reigning like feudal fortresses, each ruled by a man who believed God had signed a personal contract granting him the right to break anyone darker than him. They hunted profit the way dogs hunt blood. But even dogs whine when the night grows strange. I watched them for months. Learned their habits, which bottle they drank from before bed, which servant they trusted with the keys, which prayer they pretended to say on Sunday while thinking about money. I gathered more than wax. I gathered secrets, objects, threads of their existence. A button, a coin, a bead. Nothing precious to them, everything useful to me. The first candle I poured wasn't for vengeance. It was for my son's name, to make sure the world heard it, even if his killers tried to bury it under mud and silence. On the 7th night the wick would burn down to bone, and every man who ever laughed at his death would learn what fear tastes like. I didn't start with the strongest. Strong men expect challenges. They keep weapons close, sleep light, and see enemies everywhere. The first candle was for the one who hid behind rage, the kind of violence that tries to look like strength but is just fear wearing boots. The night I melted the wax, the room smelled like tallow and river mud. My hands didn't shake. Grief burns the nerves out of a person until steady feels like instinct. I placed a coin at the bottom of the mold. My son found it last summer, polished it like treasure, called it my lucky son. He died clutching the same hands that once held that coin. Luck had nothing to do with what came next. I carved his name into the wick, not letters, but the shape of a prayer. Then I whispered the name of the first master, not his title, not the hollow sound his children said during supper. His real name, the one his mother cried in pain when he was born. A name is a key. You speak it right, and a soul opens whether it wants to or not. The flame caught with a hiss. A spark jumped like something alive. First night. First death. What people call voodoo is never just what they fear, it's what they don't understand. It isn't dolls or pins. It's memory given shape. It's truth spoken where liars can't bury it. Every object holds weight. Every sin leaves a mark. The candle wasn't a curse. It was a mirror. When light hits a mirror just right, men see themselves the way God does, without excuses. While the wick burned, the plantation slept. Steam rose from the sugarcane fields, thick as fog, muffling sound. Even the crickets seemed to hush. Somewhere miles away, in a house built on stolen backs, a man woke up choking, clawing at his chest like someone had pressed a furnace against his ribs. He tried to call for help, to curse God, to command the darkness to obey him. The darkness didn't listen. He died alone. Not screaming, gurgling. Like swamp water closing over a drowning body. People said it was a heart attack. Too much whiskey. Too many years of anger rotting him from the inside. They buried him fast before the heat could take what was left. His servants lowered the coffin with ropes that left burns on their palms. They didn't speak, but their silence said, everything. Death changes nothing if fear remains. So when the parish pretended to mourn him, I kept working. No celebration, no smile. There were 6 more nights. 6 more names. 6 more graves that would make the ground remember my son. That morning, as the sun came up over fields fed by sweat and blood, I stood at the riverbank where they found his body. The water moved slow, patient like me, 1 candle down. 6 to go. News travels fast on a plantation, faster than a horse, faster than a bullet, because every whisper carries the weight of survival. At dawn, nobody worked the fields. Nobody moved until they counted bodies. 1 missing master meant opportunity. Or danger. Sometimes the same thing. I watched from the edge of the cane rows as Thornton's overseer tried to control men he never respected. His voice cracked. Authority without a master behind it is just noise. Slaves didn't smile. Hope is a dangerous language when spoken with your face. But a stillness settled over the parish. As if the land itself paused to listen, the first death cracked something invisible. Belief. The belief that masters were untouchable. That power came from bloodlines instead of blood spilled. People will tell you voodoo makes cowards of men. Truth does that better. The overseer demanded the work continue. Nobody moved until the bell rang a second time late, off rhythm like the rope itself hesitated. They marched to the fields, eyes lowered, backs straight. But every step carried a question they were afraid to ask out loud. If 1 master can die overnight, why not 7? I didn't answer it. Not yet. Revenge without strategy is just another way to die. At dusk, I walked miles to a hut hidden behind cypress roots. Inside, a woman sat grinding herbs into powder finer than ash. Her back was straight. Her hands were sure. She didn't look up when I entered. You lit the first, she said. Not a question. A statement carved from certainty. Yes. Deaths make ripples, she murmured. But ripples don't drown kings. You need a tide. That woman was Iseulda's memory, feared like a story children whisper about in the dark. She taught my grandmother the old ways. The teachings passed like river water, hand to hand, never written, never owned. She placed a jar of salt on the table. Black salt, mixed with charcoal from a tree struck by lightning. Nature's anger caught in powder. You'll use this on night 2, she told me. Beaumont fears sickness more than pain. His soul is greedy. Greed opens doors. I imagine that man counting profits while children starved. Measuring bones by weight. I ground my teeth until I tasted blood. Rage is loud, but rituals demand calm. The wick must hear the words, not the anger. Before I left, Issei spoke quietly. Once you start the second flame, the other masters will hunt ghosts in every shadow. Fear will guide them faster than logic. Good, I said. Let fear work for me. She gave me 7 coins. Not gold. Copper coins carried by runaway slaves, the ones who didn't make it. Each one represented a dream cut short. Tools for a justice older than courts. When the sun set, I melted wax in an iron pot blackened from decades of smoke. The coin sank to the bottom like a heartbeat. The salt burned when it touched the flame. Smoke curled upward, shaped like a spine unraveling. The candle flickered once, then steadied. Second night. 6 men breathing. 1 step closer. And somewhere in a mansion full of polished wood and rotten secrets, a master woke, coughing with no reason. Beaumont didn't rule with fists, he ruled with ink. Thornton was rage in human skin. Beaumont was mathematics dressed as cruelty. He believed violence wasted resources. He preferred efficiency. Quiet punishments. Hunger as obedience. A ledger for a whip, that was why he woke choking, not on smoke. On dread, masters don't believe in the old ways when the sun is up. At night, when the walls breathe and silence presses against their ribs, that's when superstition becomes theology. He smelled something burning that wasn't in his room. He dialed his lantern up and searched the shadows like a child too proud to admit fear. That's how you break a man like him, force him to feel something he can't record, while he hunted ghosts. The plantation was already awake. Word of Thornton's death spread across fields and shacks like heat through metal. People didn't celebrate, they calculated. If one pillar cracks, the whole house can fall with the right pressure. Beaumont's slaves watched him stagger across his porch. For the first time in his life, he looked human. That terrified him more than any curse. I arrived before sunrise. No cloak. No mask. Revenge works best in daylight, when the enemy can see exactly who is dismantling them. He stared at me like I'd crawled out of a grave. He didn't remember digging. You have no right to be here, he snapped. Did Baptiste have a right to breathe? I asked. His jaw trembled. Not from remorse from exposure. Men like him don't feel guilt. They feel threat. Threat is easier to quantify. He reached for logic the way drunks reach for walls. Thornton was unstable. His death has nothing to do with. I held up the second candle. A wick dipped in black salt. The melted copper hardened inside it like a buried truth. Beaumont stepped back. You people and your toys. Your numbers won't help you, I said. You counted profit? I count blood. He hated that line because it was math he couldn't solve. I recited the ritual. Not whispered. Spoken like testimony. Every child you sold fed your ledger. Every mother you tore apart bought you another acre. You traded lives like coins, so I used coins to pay the debt. He opened his mouth to shout, but something stopped him mid-breath. Not magic. Memory. His brain dragged him somewhere he didn't want to go, the first baby he took from its mother. Her scream still lived under his skin. Superstition didn't break Beaumont. History did. He collapsed into his chair, trying to breathe like the air betrayed him. The candle burned steady between us. He stared at it as if it marked his name in fire. You can't kill a man with wax, he muttered. No, I said. But a whole county can watch him die from everything he pretended didn't exist? I left him shaking. Not touched? Not cursed. Just seen. Master Devo didn't plant sugar. He harvested sorrow. While other men grew crops, he grew debt, ripping families apart one terrified child at a time. He called it commerce. The region called it necessary. I called it what it was. Theft disguised as business. He liked to say he never killed anyone. As if selling a child wasn't a kind of death. By the time I reached his estate, the rumor had spread. Thornton gone. Beaumont broken. Devo laughed at it. He didn't believe in curses. He believed in markets. He thought power was measured in distance between a child and their mother. Distance between a crime and the consequences. That was his mistake. Distance collapses. When someone knows your sins by name, he sat at his desk, counting bills soaked in misery. He didn't hear me enter. He heard the candle hit the wood, a single wick, coated in something that looked like dried tears. He didn't look up. You people and your candles, he muttered. If you came to beg for your boy, you're late. Thornton paid well. He said it like he was talking about a mule, not a 9-year-old. I didn't speak. I placed a small object beside the candle, a fishing hook. His eyes flicked toward it. Annoyed until recognition hit him like a blow. Where did you get that? From the bayou, I said. Where he died. Something twitched in his jaw. Not guilt, fear. He was smart enough to realize what the hook symbolized. A link between the beginning of his crime and the end of his peace. You want money? He hissed. You sold children, I said. You sold mine. He leaned back, trying to cloak himself in the confidence of a businessman. I gave them opportunity, he said. He almost believed it. My voice didn't rise. Rage doesn't require volume. You took names from mothers' mouths and turned them into prices. He pushed the candle aside like it disgusted him. Slaves breed profit. It's the system. It's how the world works. And you think the world won't change? I replied. Because you've never been held accountable. Devo scoffed. No one will believe whatever story you think you're writing here. The law is on our side. The law is on your side? I said. The night isn't. He stood, towering over the candle as if height equals dominance. That's when I pulled out his ledger. Not the one he kept on his desk, the secret one his bookkeeper hid in the attic. The one where he listed names, not numbers. Features, not weights. Birthmarks, not prices. The one that proved he remembered every life he destroyed. He went pale. That was private. Private? I asked. You kept their names. You wrote their ages. You wrote where they cried. Silence. A man who survives by pretending children, our inventory, can't face the evidence that he knew. They were more. The candle burned low. He stared at it until his eyes watered. I leaned close enough for him to feel the truth. You didn't sell slaves. You sold futures. The flame flickered. Something cracked inside him, something he'd buried under ledgers and lies. For the first time in his life, he looked at his own crimes without profit. I left him there. Ledger open. Hook beside it. Candle dying slow. 3 nights finished. 3 men undone. 4 masters left. The county didn't know it yet, but the fire had already started. Everyone talked about Master Devo, but no one mentioned the woman pouring tea at the head of his table. Eliza Devo had the cleanest hands in the county. Because she made sure other people did the dirty work, she never bought a child. She just signed the receipts. When I walked into her parlor, she smiled like I was a guest. Lace gloves, lavender perfume, hair pinned so tight it could cut glass. The picture of grace, tragic business, she said. As if tragedy was weather, not a decision, she offered me tea. I let it sit and rot in the cup. Eliza believed cruelty becomes elegance if spoken softly. She talked about the strain of managing the estate while a girl younger than 12 scrubbed the floor behind her. You came about the rumor, she said, eyes bright. The deaths. Not deaths, I replied. Confessions. She laughed, sharp, brittle. Women like Eliza don't fear ghosts. They fear public disgust. You think exposing men changes anything? The system needs order. Order, her favorite word for injustice. You kept your voice low, I said. But your signature is loud? Her posture didn't break, but her eyes did a flicker of panic. She was smart enough to understand that silence isn't innocence. Silence is participation with nicer shoes. What is it you want? She asked. To hear you say the truth. Not scream it. Not cry it. Say, without the porcelain mask. Eliza stared at the window, where the workers' quarters soaked in sunlight they never got to enjoy. You don't understand, she whispered. A woman in this world has 2 choices. Obey a man or become one. No mercy in that line. Just honesty sharpened by survival. You became one, I said. And you used children to prove it. She flinched. Because she knew it was correct. Every bill she signed bought her safety, bought her status, bought her version of power. She didn't hold chains, but she held the pen. People like her never steal bread. They steal futures and call it structure. You're here to punish me? She asked. No, I said. Punishment pretends to balance scales. I'm here to reveal weight. I placed a single sheet of paper on the table, a list of names. Not the children she signed for. The women she silenced, those who came begging for their sons and daughters and left with warnings of trespassing. Eliza looked at the list like it might burn her skin. You kept records? She whispered. You kept them first, I replied. You documented grief and called it paperwork? Her face drained of color. There's terror in realizing your own handwriting is the evidence. I thought if I didn't touch the cruelty, it wasn't mine, she said. And that lie made you comfortable, I replied. Comfort built on screams you never heard because you closed the door. She didn't cry. She just sat perfect posture, shattered certainty. Some men break loud. Some women break quietly. I stood. You weren't ignorant. You were efficient? No threats? No curse. No candle. Just truth laid bare heavy enough to bend her spine. 4 masters left became 3. And one lady stopped pretending her gloves were white. Raphael Devo was the type who thought violence was leadership because his father barked orders instead of earning respect. He walked through the estate like he owned gravity every step, expecting the world to tilt in his favor. He didn't earn a single thing. He just arrived early enough to claim it. I found him in the stables, kicking a bucket because the workers didn't jump fast enough. Two horses stared at him with more judgment than any human dared give. "You're in charge now," I said. He sneered. "Always have been." Reality, he'd never made one independent decision. His father told him when to wake up, who to marry, what clothes to wear, which men to beat. And when to pretend it was discipline, he thought power lived in muscles. It actually lives in restraint, something he's never seen. "You think Mateo's death matters?" He said he was one worker. "One human," I corrected. That word irritated him. People like Raphael hate humanity because it complicates ownership. They want categories, property and privilege. Calling someone human forces them into equality, and equality threatens entitlement. He stole from us. He snapped. "The truth. Mateo asked for a Sunday off." No theft. But in Raphael's mind, dignity is rebellion. You killed him because he reminded you that you're replaceable. I said. He went still. "The worst insult to a man raised like that isn't monster. It's irrelevant." "Don't push me," he warned. "You break easy." I replied. His face twitched, the look of someone who spent years convinced fear is respect. He's never had a real confrontation without backup. No crowd. No father. No whip. Just words, and words expose frauds faster than fists. "You don't understand legacy." He said. "You don't have one," I replied. "Your name is a loan from your parents. It disappears when people stop flinching." Raphael stepped closer, trying to intimidate. But intimidation is a performance, and he lacked the script. "You think the workers care about your truth?" He laughed. "They follow power. They follow power until someone shows them it was weakness dressed as confidence," I said. "Your father acted like a tyrant to hide that he wasn't respected. You act like a copy because you don't know who you are without cruelty." That hit him. Not because it was deep, because it was obvious. "You don't know anything about this land," he growled. "I know everything built here depends on silence," I replied. And silence just ended. He swung first predictably, wild, uncontrolled, not a fighter, just a tantrum in human form. I stepped aside. He fell into the hay. The moment earned no glory. He wasn't dangerous. He was pathetic. "The men you ordered around are confessing," I said. "Your mother already cracked. Your father's secrets are rotten. You're the last branch on a dying tree still pretending you're a forest." Raphael tried to rise, but instinct pulled him back down. The smart part of him, the tiny fragment, recognized that standing meant facing what he heard. "Mateo died because you needed to feel big," I said. "And tonight, everyone sees how small you are." No candle for him. He wasn't worth ritual. Just exposure. One generation built cruelty. The next copied it with less skill. That's how empires collapse, not by rebellion but by incompetence. 3 masters left became 2. And a son learned that inheritance isn't identity. Elena Divo was never the monster in the stories. That's why she's dangerous. People imagine cruelty as rage, shouting, fists. Elena was the opposite, calm, clean, elegant. She arranged flowers while men died outside her window. She poured tea while workers bled into the soil her children later inherited. No brutality. Just approval. I found her in the parlor, polishing a glass cabinet full of imported porcelain. The room smelled like lavender domestic innocence designed to hide everything beneath it. "You knew what happened to Mateo," I said. She didn't flinch. "Of course she didn't. Flinching requires guilt." "I know many things," she replied. "None of them change history." Translation: if it can't resurrect the victim or damage her comfort, it isn't worth acknowledging. "You watched his family collapse," I said. "You watched their future disappear?" Elena set down a plate slowly, like my words were rude rather than indicting. The insult to her wasn't the accusation. It was that I dared speak it in her house. I watched a situation beyond my control. She said, "Cowardice always rewrites itself as helplessness. You controlled the man who ordered the beating." I replied, "You controlled the son who held the whip. You controlled the servants who covered the truth. Don't pretend you're neutral." Now the porcelain trembled. Not because her hands shook, because she was angry she had to hear the truth from someone she considers socially beneath her. If I interfered, It would have created chaos. No, I said. It would have created morality. Elena sighed like virtue is exhausting. People like her think ethics are a tax paid by the lower class. You can't understand the weight we carry, she murmured. The only weight you carried was jewelry, I said. And you never took it off? That landed a hairline crack in her composure. You blame me for my husband's actions, she said. No, I replied. I blame you for agreeing with them quietly enough that he never doubted himself. Silence is endorsement. She knows that. She built her identity around it. Elena's eyes hardened not grief, not remorse. Just resentment that her image was being dismantled without her consent. What do you want? She asked. Truth spoken where lies lived, I answered. She laughed, soft, brittle. Truth isn't a cure. It's a contagion. When you release it, everyone suffers. That's why you hid it, I said. Not to protect the family, to protect yourself from feeling anything. Her face cracked, then barely visible, but real. A flicker of something human fighting beneath decades of obedience. You don't know what it's like to live under a name that decides your fate? She whispered. I know exactly what it's like. I replied. That's why my brother died. Your name decided his fate. Elena looked at the porcelain again. Perfect surfaces. Fragile interiors. Everything about her life summarized in glass. You won't break this family. She said, It was already broken, I answered. You just dusted the pieces? She turned away not to hide tears. To hide indifference, that's her legacy. Not violence, permission. Some people kill with action. Others kill with absence. She chose the most comfortable brutality, doing nothing. Two masters left became one. And silence finally had a witness. Marcelino Torres never lifted a whip. He never signed an order. He never got his hands dirty. That's what made him the center of everything. Violence needs permission more than muscle. And Marcelino gave permission with a raised eyebrow. A rumor whispered at the right time, a threat disguised as advice. Weak men with influence are like mold, small, soft, and rotting everything they touch. I found him exactly where Mateo said he always would be, alone. Pretending he wasn't, the courtyard was silent. Marcelino stood under a fig tree, staring at the walls like they could defend him. They never could. Walls don't protect cowards. They trap them with their thoughts. Marcelino Torres, I said, stepping into the courtyard. Parasite. He turned, trying to look offended rather than scared. That's his first instinct. Performance? Words are dangerous. He said. No, I replied. Words expose danger. You've hidden behind people who had courage you never had. His jaw tightened, not because he disagreed, but because he knew every part of it was true. You don't understand the pressure of influence. He said, That's not influence. That's addiction. You feed on fear because you can't earn respect. He took a step toward me, the way men do when they hope proximity will substitute for power. You're trying to rewrite history. He said, No, I replied. I'm reading it out loud. You wrote the first draft. His eye twitched. A tiny, involuntary confession? Marcelino's entire life is a collection of borrowed authority. He never did anything himself, he suggested, implied, encouraged. Others carried out the brutality while he collected the reputation of a man not to be crossed. You turned Santiago into a weapon, I said. You turned Domingo into a shield. You turned Rodolfo into a dog, Hernan into a ledger, and Estevan into a mirror for your cowardice. He breathed once sharp, defensive. That's leadership, he replied. That's parasitism. Leadership risks itself. You never risked anything except other men's humanity. For the first time, his voice dropped the performance. Do you know what happens to men like me when we hesitate? He asked. Yes, I said. We get people like Mateo men who don't hesitate to pay the price for us. He looked away. Not into the distance. Into himself. He didn't like what he saw there. You think I wanted Mateo dead? He whispered. No, I said. You wanted control? Mateo refusing to kneel made you irrelevant. Irrelevance terrifies you more than guilt. I watched the truth land. Not dramatic. Not loud, quiet devastation. The kind that rots the inside. You don't get to decide my legacy, he said. You don't have a legacy, I answered. You have consequences. His face turned white real fear, not the theatrical kind. The worst punishment for Marthelino isn't pain. It's exposure. Power he can't control. Truth he can't silence. Witnesses he can't intimidate. I said one final thing slow. Precise, unmerciful. Matteo wasn't afraid of your strength. He was afraid of your influence. Strength dies with the body. Influence survives the grave. Marthelino collapsed onto the bench. Not dramatic, just empty. Parasites don't die. They dry up when the host is gone? Matteo's courage finally starved him. By dawn, the smoke from Lavin's estate curled like a black flag over the parish. 7 homes, 7 dynasties, 7 names that once ruled like gods reduced to ash, cinders, and the sound of men realizing they were never immortal. That morning was quiet, not peaceful, not celebratory. Quiet the way a battlefield feels after the last scream fades. People stood together, but not close. Everyone was waiting to see who they were without chains pulling them into formation. Freedom sounds like music in stories. In reality, it's silent. It hands you choices you never had and demands answers you never practiced giving. I walked through the courtyard where Baptiste used to run. The earth hadn't changed. The sun rose like it always had. No miracle. No divine trumpet. Just a new day, staring at people who'd never owned one before. Matteo stood by the gate, hands steady, eyes clear. He wasn't smiling. Freedom wasn't a joke to him. It was a weight, and he carried it like someone who had fought for the right to feel its heaviness. You did what you came to do. He said no, I replied. I did what they forced me to do. He understood the difference. 7 candles. 7 nights. 7 men fed into the same fire they used to warm their cruelty. But the ritual was never about revenge alone. It was about breaking the idea that their power was infinite. Men die in minutes. Myths take centuries unless someone is willing to tear them apart. People watched us from doorways and shadows. Some were scared of what came next. Some were scared that nothing would come next. Slavery teaches you how to survive inside a cage, but never how to leave one. You're leaving. Matteo said, I'm letting them build without my rage standing over their shoulders. He frowned, not disagreement, but discomfort. Leadership leaves a hole. When a tyrant falls, some people mistake the silence for danger. They'll need someone strong. He said, you're confusing strength with violence. Strong is planting something where destruction was easy. He didn't argue. He just nodded. That's the sign of a real leader, knowing when he doesn't need the last word. I walked to where Baptist's grave would be if they had allowed graves. Instead, I knelt by the bayou. Water moves forward no matter how many bodies it's asked to swallow. Rivers don't grieve. They carry. That's their mercy. I held the last candle. Small flame. Not for killing. For remembering, you deserved a world that didn't punish your joy, I said. I couldn't give it to you, but I burned the world that took it. Some people think revenge is about balance. It isn't. Balance implies fairness. There was nothing fair about any of this. Revenge is a declaration. I refuse to live in the world you built. Far behind me. Children ran slow, unsure but free. The sound cut through the silence like Baptist's laugh once did. Not the same, but real. That's the cost of liberation. You don't get back what was taken. You make sure no one else loses the same thing. I stood, leaving the candle burning in the mud. Wind would take it. Rain would erase it. But for this moment it mattered. 7 candles. 7 nights. 7 dead masters. 400 souls learning what freedom feels like when no one is watching.